Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be going over some of the new things coming in 1.0. That's going to be Gathering Storm, Tempest Strike, and Healing Hands. Now, I'm just going to be theory crafting a little bit and sharing some of my thoughts with these nodes. If you want to see the full dev post, they'll be linked down below. Also, as well, if you haven't already, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that is the best way of supporting me currently. And you can also follow me down on Twitch, as that is a way you can come and ask me questions and get some build help as well. Now, with all that being said, let's talk about the first skill, Gathering Storm. So Gathering Storm is a new auto attack that is coming for Primalist that you get at level 2, and it is replacing Ice Thorns. So you hit an enemy and you gain a stack of Storm Stack, which is then expended every second to create a Storm Bolt that hits an enemy nearby, and it's like a small little AoE. Now, of course, you can keep stacking Storm Stacks, and each stack that you have will reduce this interval of this storm stack expenditure by 2% per, all the way up to 100%, which means every single time after 50 stacks, you will expend one storm bolt whenever you actually use it. So you'll get like essentially after 50, you will spam storm bolts as fast as you can attack after that. And this skill, I think, not only is it going to make early leveling very good for Primalist, as right now early leveling for Primalist is very bad until you get Thorn Totem, but I sincerely think you might actually be able to level as this character, as we'll see later on. One of the biggest things is it gains a large amount of flat damage based on your attunement. You get one flat spell damage for your Storm Bolt per attunement. That is massive, as Primalist has a lot of attunement scaling in its tree, and you can abuse this significantly so with Exalted Attunement everywhere, and of course, get a lot of other benefits for attunement. All this combined means that like Gathering Storm as just a normal skill while leveling is going to be very strong. Now, on top of that, there's a few nodes that I want to talk about. The first one is the Frostbringer and Winter Comes nodes. These nodes, what they will do is they will turn Gathering Storm into a cold skill, which then makes it so you can take your shock chance and convert it to frostbite chance. This is from all sources, meaning you can get shock chance on the suffix of your weapon and shock chance from other sources, and then convert that to frostbite chance. This means that it will actually be viable to play a frostbite build early on, right? You can be like a melee attack speed frostbite build with like maybe wing guards or something like that, and attack very fast, get a lot of procs to, apply frostbites, because as you can tell, this will apply not only to the spell version of, your Gathering Storm, it will also apply to the melee attack. So not only do you get, of course, the AoE with the Frostbringer stuff, you'll also get the extra hits with your melee attack, so you can scale both at the same time. Now, what makes this all viable, though, is the Frostbite cold penetration per 2 attunement. So if we have 100 attunement, we get 50% cold penetration with Frostbite. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but early on, when you're trying to just season start or cycle start, this means that you can scale your frostbite penetration without needing something like snowdrifts. Now, eventually, snowdrifts would be the better play, but early on, this means you can league start this much easier than you normally could. As like I said, you get some shock chance on your items, then you get some attack speed, then you get some attunement, and then all of a sudden, you are scaling frostbite significantly better than you normally could early on, which means you can play frostbite like on a cycle start, which would be great. Another node that's really cool is the Lynan Diplomacy node that turns Gathering Storm into a spammable spell. Now, it does give it a hefty mana cost, and you can only use it with a staff. And right now, the unique staffs in last Epoch are pretty mediocre for this specific build, but it does mean that you can utilize it with things like Twisted Heart and gain a lot of ward while casting this. That's actually one good thing that Shaman is good at, is abusing something like Twisted Heart, as you can run stuff like Frostbite Shackles and get a lot of cold res, which is then converted into, of course, ward retention, which synergizes very well with Twisted Heart. And I'll be honest, this looks like self-cast Smite, but a little bit better, because as you're casting, you're with your Lynan Diplomacy, and I'm sure there will be plenty of other ways of gaining stacks with your stuff. Like, this will make it feel a lot better to play a self-cast Lightning Bolt build other than Smite, and not actually have bad clear. Like, you'll have decent clear with this. I think this will be great in the future. Definitely something I'm hyped for. Another thing that I'm really hyped for is the dual wielding support. So, with two-eyed storm here, whenever you expend a storm stack while dual wielding, you cast two storm bolts at enemies instead of just one. This doubles your clear speed, technically, significantly so. This is a lot of Stormbolt stacks and a lot of Stormbolt procs, and one of the preferred ways of playing like a Beastmaster is to dual wield and gain large benefits, right, with like a winged axe for the base crit and stuff like that, and scale as much attack speed as possible, which really does synergize with Gathering Storm and what you want to do. As since you're stacking a bunch of attunement, you don't necessarily need the best offhand ever, which means you can stack more and more attack speed. And of course, this all synergizes together, making Gathering Storm look really good. This is like by far one of the best new skills I've ever seen for last Epoch. Now, one of the last nodes that I want to talk about is Whirlwind Tactics. So Whirlwind Tactics makes it so that you can take all these extra storm stacks that you're getting and then expend them at once. What's really cool about this is we can, just get a bunch of them and then expend them. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of ways of abusing this. Like you can use it on Wolf Howl, or you can use it on like, let's say like maybe Storm Crows or something like that. There's a lot of different ways of utilizing this currently, and this will be really fun to play around with. I think an attack speed stacking Beastmaster that, expends your storm stacks using companion abilities is definitely going to be a build on my list and on my radar. Like this skill is so good that I'm actually thinking about cycle starting it if it ends up looking very good. All right, so the next skill that we're going to be talking about is Healing Hands. Healing Hands is a skill that is currently in game but does not have a skill tree. Now, with the new patch, we're going to be getting a skill tree with it, and we can heal ourselves with Healing Hand, and it has a decent amount of healing up front, and then kind of like a decay healing over time. And this can be affected by, of course, healing effectiveness, which means you can scale healing effectiveness instead of having to like use leech or something like that on your build. And how we do this is utilizing something like Cleric's Hammer. Now, Cleric's Hammer makes it so that we can trigger Healing Hands whenever we attack. This is great because whenever we use something like Vengeance or Multi-Strike or Rive, that means that we can proc Healing Hands, and it will end up replacing a lot of other things in Sentinel in general, because now we can utilize helmets like Peak of the Mountain, which gives us a large amount of crit chance for free, but it makes it so we can't leech, but when we're sustaining off of Cleric's Hammer instead, it means that we no longer need to care about leech, which means we can focus on other things like doing as much damage as possible. So Cleric's Hammer is definitely a very good start into making Sentinel feel much better overall. Now, another thing that I really like, I think this is cool, is Hands of Aelis and Searing Light. These two nodes work very well together, as it makes it so that whenever we self-cast Smite and hit an enemy, we cast Healing Hands in an AoE. Now, if you look at the gameplay footage, you'll see that Healing Hands has a pretty decent AoE, and of course we could scale this with increased AoE effect and all that. I'm sure there's AoE on the tree, and that will make it so that we can clear on a self-cast Smite build. Everyone's been asking me, Dread, where's my self-cast Smite build? Where's my self-cast Smite build? Well, thankfully, EHG has listened and given you a way to actually play self-cast Smite without it feeling like absolute garbage, because now your single target spell can also be your clear spell by proccing, of course, your Healing Hands, which will end up being much better than the normal way that we play Smite right now. And I really like that it specified it for directly casting Smite. So now we actually have a reason to directly cast Smite other than, doing a bunch of single target, right? So that's really cool. Now, the next node that we can talk about here is Divine Catalyst. Now, Divine Catalyst is getting like Divine Bolts in general are getting the kind of same tech that like Shadow Daggers and like Gathering Storm is getting with Storm Bolts, where it's going to be kind of a big thing in Paladin in general, where you can proc a bunch of Divine Bolts, and all of the Divine Bolt synergy stuff on the passive tree and on idols, they'll all scale with the nodes inside Healing Hands, meaning you don't even need to play Healing Hands to play with Divine Bolts. You could proc them with the old idols, or you could proc it with the melee thing on the tree as well. Or there probably might be a unique, I don't know, maybe that would be cool, right? But it makes it so that whenever you self cast, of course, Healing Hands, we cast a decent amount of Divine Bolts. And as you can tell in the footage here, the clear on it's pretty good. It turns out with Divine Bolts, if they can, do the damage that I'm hoping that they can do, we can end up using just self-cast Healing Hands for clear and then Smite for single target. And in that regard, this might actually end up being a useful build. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is, of course, Unbroken Prayer and Skyfall. So Unbroken Prayer makes it so that you cast Healing Hands 4 times per second. Now, if you look at the other Healing Hands nodes, like I think the one that makes it into a hit with 200% damage effectiveness, this will cast that 4 times per second. So it is the Sentinel equivalent of having, of course, like a channeled Ellie Nova, and channeled Ellie Nova is pretty good, turns out. And casting it 4 times per second, that means it's like essentially like, imagine if you had 300% cast speed per second, right? That is like the feeling of it. Of course, you have to sit still and channel, but casting something 4 times per second is definitely a very good benefit for doing so, right? Especially with Healing Hands, where on a boss, you can kind of like sit on top of them and have the Healing Hand heal you while you're dealing damage to the boss. So I think that there's a lot of benefits for utilizing Unbroken Prayer. And of course, the node after it, Skyfall, that can make it so we can have a gigantic laser beam against enemies, like that's a fire damage over time. We will see if we can actually scale this into the end game. I don't know. There's no numbers on the node, so we don't know how it actually scales, the damage effectiveness and stuff like that. But if the damage effectiveness and there's more damage in the tree and stuff like that, if there's enough of that in the tree, then we might be able to actually play with Skyfall as a single target source. Now, that's going to be it for this video today. I'm not going to be talking about Tempest Strike because I'll be honest, I'm not really impressed by Tempest Strike. I think it's kind of meh. So I'll probably leave that for a different video, or I need to actually play with it in game to talk about it because I'll be honest, it does not look very good currently. But yeah, we'll get into that later on. With all that being said, this has been Dread, off to go do something else. Bye!